Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Kiddushin daf Nun Aleph. We're going to begin on the very bottom of Nun Amid Beis, Gufa, getting back to what we said before, which was on yesterday's daf that Omer Rabba Kol Sheinu B'Zech Hazeh Fil B'Bas Achas Eino. The din is that if a person would be Mekadesh a woman, which of course is fine, and then afterwards he wishes to be Mekadesh her sister, it's not a good Kiddushin. So since that cannot be done b'zach zeh, you cannot marry the sister, so if you would decide to marry both of them at the same time, it also does not work. And that's basically what our Mishnah said. So Eis Abai. So on this, Abai poses the following question as we continue to Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. Hamar b'maiser. Let's say a person gives more maiser than he's required to give. So as Rashi says, Hamafresh echad mechamisha. Instead of separating 10%, you separated 20%. So what is the din? Peirosa mesukanim. So the din is that the other part is no longer tevel. However, umaisus mekukolin. Because meiser is only supposed to be 10%, so since you separated 20%, so in that is a mixture in which some of it is meiser and some of it's not meiser, and therefore that becomes problematic. But certainly the meiser was separated. In fact, the Gemara, why do we say that this is the din? Why don't we say, in other words, if you would be mafresh the 10% as you're supposed to, which works, if you would then do another 10%, that 10% is nothing. So the fact that you cannot do it that way, so if you do it together, so it also shouldn't work. So why are we saying that the peiroisav is misukanim? So Amarle, he said, I understand, but you can't exactly compare this to Kiddushin. The shani meiser is different to isi l'chatzoyin, because it could be in halves. What does that mean? The oimer tiskadish palga dechitata kadsha. If you would say, I want to not be Mekadesh, I want to be Makdish, half of each kernel, in other words, half of each grain, which will turn the 1/5 into 1/10, so then that works. Says Rashi Hilkoch, Kishehivrish B'Bas Achas, when you separate the 20% together, Yoiser Mekashir, more than you were supposed to, Yeshul Meiser, L'chul Al Kol Chita V'Chita. It's shaykh that each kernel, each grain, could have half of it being meiser and half of it not. Lafi cheshvan, b'ikol meimer denispeshu kuhu. So therefore, that is the reason why we make this distinction. But you can't say that half of a woman is Kiddushin, half of this sister and half of the other one. So okay, so v'hari meiser. How when it comes to meiser behema, the chiyuv of separating 1/10 of your flock, of your animals. Obviously, the leikach l'chatzayin, because it's an animal, it's not half kadosh and half not, like something like food. V'leik b'zar chazeh, and there's no ability again b'zar chazeh. You're not able to say that this one is meiser behema, and then the next one is also considered to be meiser behema. No, it doesn't work like that. So it doesn't work b'zar chazeh. Let's say both animals came out of the pen at the same time at number 10. So it's really 10 and 11, but they happened at the same time. Bekarin Asiri, and you called number 10, 10. V'achad asar, and the 11th one, Muravim Zemzeh, and the 11th one is mixed in with that one. So we see that if it happens b'vas achas, it still works. But why? It was B'zech or Zeh wouldn't work. So how can you tell me that just because it doesn't work B'zech or Zeh, that B'vas Achas, it also shouldn't work? We see it does. Versus, okay, but Meiser Behema is also exceptional. Shani Meiser Behema, the Isa B'tois, as is brought down in many places, that when it comes to Meiser Behema, it could be all Chal, even when you make a mistake. Mistakes still work when it comes to Meiser Behema. Where do we see this? None, because we learned in Bechayris, elsewhere, Karla Chia Siri, this guy really made a mistake. He made a few mistakes. He called number 9, 10, And then Lasiri, the one which should have been Meiser Behema, number 10, Tishi, he called it 9, but again, it really is the correct one. La'achan Asar Asir, and then he calls number 11, 10, Shloshin Mukdashim. So all three of them are considered to be Mukdashim. They all are Mukdash. So, let's first of all look in Rashi. V'alchan Asar Muravim. Echad Mehen Meiser Gomer. We don't know which one was Meiser Behema out of the 10 and 11. Vasheni Shem Shlomim Olav has the din Shlomim Kedin Achad Aser Shekar Asiri Achashata. So look at Rashi. Shani Meiser Disa Batais Im Ta Malikros Asiri. If you end up making a mistake and calling number 10 Bishmai Habi Meiser, if you end up calling an animal number 10, even though it's really not number 10, it's still considered to be Meiser Behema. Of a Kiddushin, skipping a few lines, the leisnu b'tois, there's no din of making a mistake. Eino b'zachar zeh, or eino b'vasachas, b'chol makom she'eino b'zachar zeh. It's possible, again, look in the girsa, flipping it around. But there's no concept of splitting in half, and there's no concept of tois when it comes to marriage. So again, it's true that this rule doesn't apply to Meiser, doesn't apply to Meiser Behema for various reasons. So, Hari Toida, when it comes to bringing the carbon Toda and accompanying with the Toda, you also have to bring Lachmi Toida. You have to bring 40 loaves of bread, some chametz and some matzah. So, delays the b'tois, there's no din of making mistakes, that it's all chal anyway. But also there's no concept of Zachar Zeh, Itmar. We learned regarding a carbon taida in Menachos, it says, taida shenishchata al shmoinim chales. So you take a carbon taida, you're supposed to bring the carbon together with 40 loaves, but instead you brought 80. So in this situation, the question is, do you want to be yotzeh your taidasai, your carbon taida, in this way? So since you brought 80 instead of 40, does that work? So Chizki Omer Kadshile Arbaim Mitaych Shmainim. He says 40 out of the 8 are considered to be Kadosh. Yochanan Omer Lo Kadshila Arbaim Mitaych Shmainim. Yochanan says you cannot be Mekadosh the 40 within the 80. So let's look at Rashi. Lo Kadshu. So Kal Sakadaitach. What is we thinking? What is this machlokas? But a rabbi complete must be that this is a whole machlokas. Dioimer koshen bezachazeh and basachas. So maybe that's gufa the machlokas over here. Whether or not we would apply this concept. Umashula medachiskia shahay rabbi shel Rabbi Yochanan. So the question is regarding the shita of Chizkiah. Again, we have over here this machlokas between Chizkiah and Rav Yochanan. Chizkiah says it does work, right? Now Chizkiah is the teacher of Rav Yochanan, as we see in Masechtas Eruvin. So apparently, we would be holding like this opinion, a very strong opinion, and therefore the question is, how is it possible? Again, to say this. Now, again, this is a machlokas Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan. So it's interesting. It's like a machlokas between the teacher and the student. But apparently, we would be holding like the sheet of the teacher, and therefore we see actually it does work. Moran says, no, you're obviously missing the point regarding this question, regarding Taida. Didn't we learn? Both Chizkiah and his student Rabbi Yochanan agree. If you would actually say, I want to be Mekadosh 40 among the 80, that it actually would work. If you would actually say that. It says Rashi, his intention was only to Mekadosh 40. That's all he wanted. He's only bringing the other 40 lachrayas. What does that mean? It says Rashi, Shehim Yavdu, O Yitmu, He's only bringing the 80s like just in case. So he didn't really want to bring 80. He's only really wants to bring 40, which is what you're supposed to do. He's just bringing the other 40 just in case something bad happens. They become tamei, so they'll have the other 40. You won't have to worry about it. But so in that situation, his intention, his kavanah, is just simply to bring 40. So therefore, everyone would hold that would actually work. Lo yikdishu arba'im el im kain kachi shmainim lo kachi. He says, I don't care about the laws of 40. I want 80 for some reason. And I will not allow the 40 to be kadosh unless all 80 are kadosh. It doesn't work. So this person's kavana actually is almost as a raya, pumpakert, to show that it doesn't work, because you can't be makdish more than you wish, more than the din is. The whole between Chis and Rabbi Yochanan is el bastam. The person just brought the 80. His intention was just achrayis, as we said. Really, he just wants to bring 40, but the other 40 are just in case, and therefore it's okay. His kavanah was for a carbon gadol, and you can't bring a carbon gadol. I mean, you can bring a beautiful carbon, but you can't bring more than what's prescribed in the Torah. So the Torah says 40 is 40. Question 1. So the whole machlokas is pligi b'oimed daito the makdish stama. What's going on in a person's mind when you're makdish it stam? Chizkiah says you're makdish it because you only want 40. The other 40 is achrayus. Rabbi Yochanan says no, you're doing it as a carbon gadol. Let's see how he writes this. The daito to lo yikdishu arbaim el I kachi shmainim chi agavni in chalin al harbaim. I only want it to work as a carbon gadol. I want all 80 or nothing. So in that case, it doesn't work. Okay, so that is again the answer regarding this. Okay, weiter. Let's continue. So the Gemara continues and says as follows: Rabba lom lishnui karabba. Why does Rava say the answer? We could have gotten to the two dots, I guess. Why did Rava say like Rabba? Typically, Kiddushin shein masun labiyan inhu. Well, the Rabbi Marchama kaimer. So, in other words, if we're going all the way back to what we saw in yesterday's daf, that Rava said that there's this concept. Rava says the concept kol shein b'zachas afilu b'vasachas eino. Why don't we just say the reason why it's not a good Kiddushin is because it's Kiddushin shein masun labiya. So the only time you can do a Kiddushin is if you're shaykh to be able to consummate the marriage. But in this situation, since we're dealing with two sisters, so that will not work. Obviously, you can't because it's an Isser Karis. So why does he say that? He goes, okay, according to him, that would be a second reason, but he wants to bring down the reason in accordance to the point of Rami Barchama. Okay, Idmar. Kiddushin shein masun labiya. So since we brought this up, so now the Gemara is going to shift and talk about this concept. So, what is the din if you did Kiddushin with someone who it's not shaykh to be able to have biyah for halachic reasons? So let's look at Rashi. Kiddush achas mishnei achayos. You, for example, you married one of two sisters, v'pirish ezehu mehem, but you didn't explain to which one. So you get to the father Kiddushin and says, yes, I'm marrying one of your daughters. But you didn't say which one. Dein yochel lisa achas mehen. You can't actually marry one of them, the shema zuhi achos ishto, because maybe you're going to end up having tashmish with the other woman. Maybe you were mekadesh the different sister A, can't now have tashmish because maybe it's really you're going to end up having tashmish with sister B. You're mekadesh sister A, so therefore it's a case of Kiddushin shein masun labiya. Obviously, there's other cases. That's the case that Rashi explains. So over here we have Abai and Rava. Abai Omer have a Kiddushin. Rabbi Omer will have a Kiddushin's machlokas. Rabbi Bar Ahina Asfrili, he explained to me based on the pasuk. It says Ki kach ish isha ubola. Why does it say bia right after Kiddushin? Must be Kiddushin masun labiya have a Kiddushin. Kiddushin shein masun labiya will have a Kiddushin. They're totally zabzeh, and therefore, if it's not shaykh for bia, then it's not shaykh Kiddushin. Okay, Tanan. So we learned on our Mishnah. Hamakadosh is a Makadosh. Isha ubita, you marry a woman and her daughter, or Isha v'achosa, a woman and her sister, ke'achas, at the same time, ein mekudeshes. It's not good. It's not a good Kiddushin. Why? Because, as we said, it can't happen b'zachazeh, afil b'achas einoi. So, but we can make a diak. Ha'achas mi'isha vita, or mi'isha v'achos mekudeshes. Let's say you married one of the two, but you just don't know which one it is. You didn't marry both. You married one, but you never explained, or no one knows who you were mekadesh. You yourself don't know. So therefore, what was our mission? The dik is the mekadeshes. Yomai Kiddushin shein masun labiya inhu tiyafta de Rava. We see from our Mishnah dik against Rava, that Kiddushin Shein Masun L'Biyah still works, because the Mishnah only says you can't marry a woman and her sister, which is mashma. You can marry the woman. You're mekadosh either one of the two sisters. It's a good Kiddushin. So Rava will say no. Well, Taimech, according to Yuri's name, a Seifa. Well, let's look at the Seifa of the Mishnah. The Seifa brought a story. There were 5 women. In the 5 are 2 sisters. And the Mishnah said, this guy took a basket, a bundle of figs. Theirs. Why does it mention that? We'll see it later on. I want you all to be marrying me at the same time, all of you, with this kalkola. And one of them was Makabal. The sisters are not married. The 2, which is mashma, you can't be married to those 2. But you are married to the other 3. Now, hey, what exactly is this case? Let's understand a little bit better. So if he says the language of kulchem, so we say kani ad v'chamorhu. That's a case of ad v'chamor. The ad v'chamor will kana. What does that mean? You and a donkey. When we're talking about marriage over here, we're talking about donkeys. Look at Rashi. Kani ad v'chamorhu naisim matanas l'naylad uber shibamei imo. You gave gifts to someone who was born, and also for a fetus. Sheinu koina klum. A fetus cannot be koina anything. Gama noyod enu koina. So also in that case, since you said it together, so also the noyod is not koina anything. Shahar lo hikna lezeh b'lo zeh. You cannot acquire one without the other. So if it's a situation where one of the parties is not shaykh in a kinyan, then the whole thing is thrown off when you say the language kulchem, because you're combining them all together. So if you use the language of kulchem, then it certainly would not work. So that can't be the situation. As we continue to Nun Aleph Amud Beis. So instead, El Olav must be the Amruhu Achas Mikem. You said, I'm going to marry one of you, which you didn't explain which one. So it's a kasha again on Rabbi. So we see that on Abaye, because it says the sisters are not married. Why aren't the sisters married? So none of them know who he actually married. He only wanted to marry one of them. So the question is, why would we say that only the sisters is it not a Kiddushin? Why is it a good Kiddushin for the other 3? It's Kiddushin Shein Masun L'Biyah. Must be we see a raya from the Seva that it is a Kiddushin. So the Rabbi Kasha Reisha over Rabbi Kasha Seva. So, okay, fine. You have a question on him, but you also have a question. So how do we understand the mission? The mission itself seems contradictory. So obviously we have to rectify and reconcile this Mishnah. Abaye matar tzatami, Rabbi matar tzatami. So Abaye matar tzatami. So Abaye, who again said the din is that it's a good Kiddushin. It doesn't matter if it's Kiddushin Shein Masun L'Biyah, it's still a good Kiddushin. So how is he going to explain our Mishnah? So Abaye matar tzatami. He'll explain our Mishnah like this: Hamakadosh ishu bita. You marry a woman and her daughter. O isha v'chayis, a woman and her sister. Ka'achas at the same time. And mikadeshes. Mashma. Ha'achas mi'ishu bita, mi'ishu v'achayis mikadeshes. Because we see, even though there's no bia, still it's a good Kiddushin, because the Reisha is good according to him. It's a case of Kiddushin Shein Masun L'Biyah. However, V'im Amar, but if he said, Haruya L'Biyah, that I only want the Kiddushin to be chal to someone who is fit that I can eventually have bia with, to Skanishli and mikadeshes, then it would not work. So if he specifically stipulated, now normally Kiddushin Shein Masun L'Biyah is Kiddushin, but if he specifically said, I do not want the Kiddushin to be chal if I am not shaykh to have bia with her, then obviously we're going to listen to that stipulation. And that's what the story is talking about. There's 2 sisters, he gave the figs, but Omar, and this is what he adds, Haruya li mikem tiskadishli, only those who are fit to have bia, it'll be a Kiddushin. And therefore, if that's what he said, then obviously, then the sisters are obviously out of the equation. But the other three are in the equation. Okay, fine. Rava, because even though it's a suffix, but they are in general roy to have bia with him in the normal situation, if they would know. But since they didn't, fine. So Rava matar time, and Rava will give according to his reasoning. He had a problem with the ratio. So Hamakadish achas meisha ubita, a person who marries the sister, a woman and her daughter, or achas meisha v'achaisa, or he marries one, the woman and her sister, and the sister. Nasa kamisha kiddush isha ubita. Even if you just married one of them, in other words, you just didn't explain which of the two sisters you're married to, that's just the same. It's a nasa kami. Shekidish isha bita. It's the same din as actually marrying a woman and her daughter. So he's saying you have to say a nasa kami, that the reisha is not talking about only in that situation, but also in the situation where he was mekadosh one of two sisters. The same din applies. He's not going to be married to them because Kiddushin Shin Mesur and Labia will have a Kiddushin. And now, of course, the Seifa supports that. According to simple reading, the two sisters, we give the figs. All of you are married to me, and one of the two sisters are married to me. Doesn't work because it's Kiddushin Shein Single Bia. Tashma. So now we're going to try to see which opinion we actually hold like. Okay. Mekadesh is bitoy stam. A person is mekadesh a woman stam. So that, in other words, he doesn't say anything. Ein boigeres b'chalal. So a girl who's a boigeres is not in the category. What does this mean? So Rashi says, achas mibodoy sech mekadeshesli. So a man has 10 daughters of varying ages. So we have no idea which person he was actually referring to, which daughter he'd be married to. So the boigeres is not in the category. Says Rashi, Imesh boigros harbe. Let's say he has a few girls, a few daughters that are already, let's say, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds. And achs mehen b'safi kedushin. Hello, they're not part of this potential doubt. Lahad starich get. There's no need for them to receive a get. Because the father no longer has jurisdiction over them because they're already of legal age. They're already older. Since they're the stage of a bogeris, which is really 12 and a half, so then already they're not in the case of the suffix. Now let's make a diak. That's only because it's a bogeris. Hakatanois b'chlal. Let's say he had 3 daughters, 7, 8, and 9. All right, so he had like 3 young girls. So all of them are going to need a get because it's shayich that each one that he was referring to one of them. Again, it's a kasha. Why should they require a get, the katanois? After all, they're all dealing with sisters, and therefore it's a case of Kiddushin Shein Mesur Labia. The fact is, it must be that it is a good Kiddushin, so it's a Kashan Rabba. So Rabba, no, Hachmaiskinan, we're talking about B'She'en Sham El Gedol Katana. We're talking a situation where the guy only had 2 daughters. He didn't have 100 daughters, he had 2. He had an 18-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old daughter, okay? So since we know that the bogeris is out of the category, so in that case, it's the katana. And then obviously he's going to be married to her. Hi boigris katani, which is Lashon Rabim. My boigris dalma, just referring to in general, a woman who's a bogeris. Any situation where a daughter is a bogeris, so then they would not fall into the category. But we're only talking about one girl. One bogeris and one katana. So Yehachi Malamemra. So what's the chiddush? Obviously, he's actually married to this girl. So it's a good Kiddushin, and it's Kiddushin Mesur Labia. Hakamaiskinan to Shavise Shliach. We're talking about a situation where there was a Shliach, says Rashi, L'kadshel Chol Haba. The Gedola appointed, the Bogeris, the 20-year-old girl, appointed her father to be her Shliach, to be Mekabel Kiddushin on her behalf. So you would think that actually the bogeris should be the one married. So madatim akimakabel kedushay adaiti didakamakabel. You would imagine that the father is doing it on behalf of his older daughter. The But the reality is that money would go to his oldest daughter. And the father would rather have the money for himself, which again, this is an unbelievable chiddush. We also said before, a person wouldn't have the chutzpah to make their parent know a shliach, which is another possible answer as to why this would not necessarily be a situation. Or at least maybe a son wouldn't do that, maybe the daughter would. Okay. So that's the answer. So Milo Askina de Amrle Kiddushi Didach. Why can't we just assume that she said, you know what, you keep the money? Now feel hachi lo shavik inish mitzvah the ramile v'yom mitzvah lo ramile. So nonetheless, the father has a mitzvah to be able to marry off his daughters, and that's only when he has reshus over them. Once they're bogeres, no. So therefore, a person would rather marry off would rather be makabel the Kiddushin for the katana and not for the bogeres, even though she told the father to do it. And it's very hard to understand, but that's how we're reading this up. Question 2. Hamikanishes bito stam ein bogeres b'chlal. My kamashmon masnisin. So either it teaches us Kiddushin shen misur labia is Kiddushin, or we say no, there's just two girls, a 20-year-old and a 11-year-old, and in the 20-year-old, the bogeres made the father into a shliach. Nonetheless, she's still not part of the suffix. There's no suffix at all. She's not going to be included in that. Let's look at TA 18, which may be the same thing. Hamakadosh es bito stam ein bogeres b'chlal. My kamashmon, two answers, and we just saw them. So that was nun aleph moment beis. TA 18 is identical to question 2. Okay. Okay. Let's go weiter. So, Tashma. Again, we're going to try to bring support either way. Person has 2 pairs of daughters. What does that mean? So let's say he has 2 wives. He has and each wife has 2 daughters. The Gemara continues. Mishtei nashim. So a man has 4 daughters, 2 from one wife and 2 from another wife. And I want to marry your older daughter, your old daughter, biti gedola. Now what does that mean? You have in the first marriage you have an 11 and 10-year-old daughter, and in the second marriage you have a 9 and 8-year-old daughter. The eniodea im gedolishim gedolos. Is he referring to your oldest daughter? Im gedolishim katanos. Maybe it's the oldest daughter in the second marriage, which would be really the third oldest. Im katana shibgedolos shehi gedolim in gedola shibgetanos. Maybe it's referring to your second daughter that you had. Now, even though it's true, she's not the oldest, but she's older than the other 2 from the second marriage. So Kulma Surah is they're all aser chutz b'katanas b'katanas. They Rameir. So Rameir holds, and this is going to be Kash and Rabba, that they're all aser. Now, why? Again, it's a case of Kiddushin Shein Misur Labiyah. Must be because Havi Kiddushin. Now, Hakmai Skinan Kishahukru was Seivnis Arbu. We're talking about a situation where at the time of the Kiddushin, somehow it was known who he was going to marry. Therefore, at that time, it's a Kiddushin which was Misur Labiyah. And then for whatever reason, it became forgotten. Why would you assume that? Because Dekanami, we can prove it in the language. Detani Eni Yodea, Lokatani Eni Yodua, Shemamina. It says the language of that's no longer known, as opposed to it was never known. So So then obviously, why would you not say it's a good Kiddushin? Because at the time of the Kiddushin, you knew who it was. Lafuki min Rabbi Yosi. What's Rabbi Yosi? Yermulu machas inish nashulus feka. He holds a person would not put himself into a case of a suffix. And therefore, if you don't put yourself into a suffix, says Rashi, L'hasker Shem Gedoyla Imo Gedoy Shibakulon. If you didn't mention the girl's name, you most likely meant the oldest one. It's possible you would have put yourself into the suffix by using this language. Okay. But it sounds like Rabbi Yossi would actually hold that he probably was actually referring to the oldest one. Okay, but we don't hold like that. Tashma. Misha Kiddush Achas Mishtei Chayos. The idea is Kiddush. So you're Mekadosh one of 2 sisters. You don't know which one. So nice and get Lazu. You get Lazu. So similar point, right? It's a Kash on Rava. That you, clearly it's a case of Kiddushin Shein Labiyah. Now, Achamaskina and Kashirka was saved this Arbu. Again, you knew before and then you forgot. Why? Dekanami diktani eniodea v'okatani eniodua. Same the same language that it's not known now, but not that it was never known. Again, remember what's a chiddush? Sefer tzricha, you don't need a chiddush for that, but it's only to build onto the second case, which is this mace. So again, what happened? He was a mekadosh 2 sisters, and then all of a sudden now, so we know obviously it's a good Kiddushin, but it's a suffix now because we don't know who he's married to. Now, what happens if he dies? Now, normally there's a din yibum, but we don't know which woman to be that there will be a zika to. And he has one brother. So chaylitz l'shtein. This one brother, because of this doubt, he has to do chalitza to both of these sisters. Let's say he has 2 brothers. So echad chaylitz v'echad miyavim. So if one brother can do chalitza to the 2 sisters, and then the other one is able to do yibum. Im kadmu v'kansu, and let's say the guy did yibum first. We're not going to remove him from this situation. Davka michlatz v'hader yavume. We said that first you should do chalitza, then yibum. But yavume v'hader michlatz lo, not yibum first. Why? Because the kapagha b'chais zuku kasai. Because he's reaching the case of achas zuku kasai. That it's possible that again there's a zika on the sister and not her. So therefore, because it was a zika on the sister, you're supposed to marry the sister and not the other one. Okay, and this is all b'safek. Okay, so let's look at this Rashi, the last Rashi. Sefer Yitzrich. Degatani hayishtayim echad chayos v'echad miyabim. You have 2 brothers, one does chalitza, one does yibum. Lashminan davka hachi michatz chayin minayu. I may not have said it this way. So one brother does chalitza to one of the girls, l'chad beresha, v'hader miyabim, and then the other brother can do yibum, sheni l'shniya, because mamanavshach. It's a mamanavshach. Imzu arusas achiv. If this was actually the right girl, so shaper miyabim. So it's okay. You're allowed to do yibum with her. Now v'im lav. If let's say she's not the one, so nachos b'alma. She's like a nachos b'alma because his brother did chalitza on the sister, the right one, and therefore that's it. She was the one, and now the other one you can marry. A brother can marry a sister, right? It's just 2 brothers can marry 2 different sisters. One man can't marry 2 sisters. Okay, so that's the correct way. But again, it should be done that first chalitza was done and then yibum, but not that yibum should be done and then chalitza. And the reason is because if yibum would be done first, so it's possible that you're not really doing yibum or marrying the right woman. You may be marrying the wrong woman, and you actually have a zika. There's a connection to the sister. So there's a zika. It's achos zuku kasai. You're marrying the sister of the one who's zakuk to, and that you're not supposed to do. But if the other brother did chalitza to one of them, then at first that's not a problem. Tashma. Shnayim shekitchu shtei chayes. You have 2 guys marry 2 sisters, which normally is okay, but these guys are really off the wall. Zeinu de'ez kiddush, zeinu de'ez kiddush. Neither of them know who they married. So you have 2 brothers that married 2 sisters, but they don't know which sister they were married to. So it's zen nois and shnei gittin, zen nois and shnei gittin. Each one gives 2 gittin. So again, this is a kasha and rava. Must be because it's Kiddushin Shin Mishal Labia. Whereas no Hachanami, Shehukah was Soiv Nisar B'dei Kanam Detani and Devil Katani and Yadua Shmamina. Again, the exact same thing. It was known at one point, and these 2 brothers, maybe a bit forgetful, at this point no longer remember who they were married to. So Yehachim al remember. So what's the chiddush? Obviously, it was a good Kiddushin because it was a valid Kiddushin. They just forgot. So Seifa Tzrichli. Again, we need it for the Seifa. So instead of the case before, it was one brother with a suffix of 2 sisters. Now you have 2 brothers with 2 sisters. Let's say both brothers died. Mace. Both of these guys died. But these 2 brothers, who again were maybe not so knowledgeable or smart, they died. And now the question is, what do we do with these 2 girls? Because both of them were married to one of these 2 brothers, but we don't know which one it was. So ach l'ze'ach, right? This one has a brother, and the other one has a brother. So what do? Zeh chayilutz l'shtein, v'zeh chayilutz l'shtein. So each brother will do chalitza. Right? Each one will do chalitza. And this way, chalitza is done, and therefore these girls can finally go free and hopefully marry people who remember who they're married to. L'zeh echad, l'zeh shnayim. Let's say one of these brothers had one brother, and the other one had two. Okay? So obviously referring to like half brothers and stuff, right? So as we continue, Nun Beis and Aleph, ha'echad chayilutz l'shnayim. The one who has one brother should just do chalitza for both, which would definitely free them on that side. And then Havashnayim, then now you have the two other brothers, Echad Chalitza, Echad Miyabim. Again, one brother should do Chalitza to one, and the other one then could do Yibam Mamanashach, as we said before. Im Kadma B'Kansu, if let's say instead one of these guys immediately married, Ein Moitzi Noisim Yadam, we're not going to remove this because the first guy at least did Chalitza to both. Now these other two guys, they were supposed to be doing chalitza then yibum, but instead he did yibum then chalitza. So again, mamarashach, it's then we say it's still okay. But davka michlatz v'hader yevume. That's only if chalitza was done then yibum. But yevume v'hader michlatz lo de kapaga b'yavam l'shuk. Because in this situation, you're finding it's a yavama in the shuk. Let's look at this Rashi. We'll stop there, but let's look at this Rashi. So, ha'echad chayilutz l'shtein. Let's look at the two top Rashis and then Beis and Aleph. Shari enu yochel ichnois. So this one guy can't marry either the two sisters because dilma paga b'achos akuka, because it's shaykh that if he marries one, the other one was really the zakuk. So the first, if there's a 1 and 2 situation, so the guy who has one brother should do chalitza right off the bat. So he's gone. So he no longer has any connection. But now there's still this suffix with these two girls. So now what do these other two brothers do? So we said one should do chalitza, and then the other one could do yibum, and it'll work mamanavshach. However, it's dafka katani ha'echad chayilutz l'shneian, that one does chalitza first to both of them. Tchila v'hadu yevumi achas me'ashnayim achar chalitzas achiv, and then the other one can do yibum after his brother did chalitza. That's the proper order. Yevumi achas min hashtayim. Let's say the guy who's achas min hashtayim tchila, he does yibum. Afil achar chalitzas achiv, even after his brother does chalitza. Shein kan achas akuka. There's no din of achas akuka because his brother did chalitza first. Lo lishtre, he's not allowed to do that. The first guy had to do chalitza first. Kivan doli chalitz hayachil l'shnein. Since the other guy who was supposed to do chalitza to the two girls, if he didn't do that first, which was really the first step, ikol mechash bezu shemisyavemes, the guy who did yibum, were concerned about this because shemazuhi yivimto shel yechidi. Maybe really this girl that he married is the yavama of this other guy. Nimza kainsen naisi yavama l'shuk. It's like he's marrying a woman. He did yibum with a woman who was l'shuk, really not related to him at all. It was really supposed to be a different guy, totally different guy that was supposed to do yibum with her. Someone who's not your avama, you married her. Below chalitza, you didn't do anything. Misham hakdamas chalitzas echem min hashnayim liyibum shel sheni le'israch lemisnei dahad bekimas achas ukasam areish shaminan. So again, we're already going to hold the case of achas ukasai. So over here we're talking about yavama l'shuk. Okay. Fine, we're going to, again, stop there. Let's see if there's another question. Question TB19, possibly. Hamakdish isha ubito isha v'chaysa k'achas ein mekadeshes. Ma tam de ein mekadeshes l'gamri v'afil ein Kiddushin al achas mihen b'safik. So there's two answers. Either Rabbi who sells kol shein b'zachazeh afil v'achas eino, or because it's Kiddushin shein misun labia, we'll have a Kiddushin. Ad kan.